I'd like to introduce tonight's guest speakers. Many of you know these two if you've been involved with activities in the Houston Astronomical Society or the Fort Bend Astronomy Club, but we're really happy to have them come to speak to us tonight and talk to us about electronic assisted astronomy or electronically assisted astronomy. EAA is what it generally goes by. And this is a really interesting topic for a lot of folks, myself included. I tried doing some EAA this past week for the International Observe the Moon Night. Wasn't very successful, but I thought it was okay. It's something to build on. So I'm hoping to learn from these guys. Our speakers are Carlos Maria Arieu and Jeff Lepp. Carlos joined the Houston Astronomical Society more than 2 years ago, where he decided to spend more time and effort learning to observe the heavens in a more systematic and dedicated way. After returning home, after observing at the HAS dark site, he would set up his 8-inch Dobsonian in his backyard, only to become frustrated by the lack of visible objects in the suburban night sky. I think we can all relate to that. This most motivated Carlos to find a way beyond the barrier of light pollution so he could observe at home and allow himself to capture images to share his backyard celestial observations. Jeff has been active in the amateur astronomy community here in Houston for the last 9 years, first as a member of the Fort Bend Astronomy Club and later as an HAS member. Jeff served as vice president of FBAC for 2 years and currently serves as coordinator and committee co-chair for FBAC's 18-inch Newtonian located in the East Dome at the George Observatory. An avid astrophotographer, Jeff was able to combine his enthusiasm for outreach with astrophotography using EAA to help the George Observatory reopen during the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you spend any time out at the dark site, you're likely to find one of these two guys out there on a pretty regular basis. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's guest speakers, Carlos Maria Arieu and Jeff Lepp.
Okay, hello everyone. Let me, let's see. We're on the air, let's go. Let me share the screen.
Okay, and while you're doing that, Carlos, I just wanted to remind everybody that if you have questions for either Carlos or Jeff, please use the chat feature that we have within Zoom itself. Ask your questions there, and when we get to the end of the presentation, I will ask you to come off of mute and ask your questions directly to our guest speakers.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So I will start, and Jeff will continue with the second part. I want just to, some of you already know me since are members of the EAA Special Interest Group. And for those who don't know me, I'm not a professional astronomer nor AP guy. I'm just an amateur guy, and I just wanted to share with you what I have learned during this year and a half, more or less, because that's the time when I started doing EAA, and help you make an educated decision whether this is something that might help you to improve your observing skills and keep on observing when you're not at our wonderful dark side. So as Joe said, I kind of started around 2 years ago trying to go a little bit deeper into astronomy, especially when I remember when Jupiter and Saturn kind of got together, and I was watching them with a scope that I gave as a present to one of my daughters when she was 15 years ago. So 15 years old, that was like 10, 15 years ago. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And I said, okay, let's see if I can get some pictures of that. And I found a little article online that kind of explained how to use the cell phone attached to a telescope, and then after processing and going through different steps, you get a pretty nice picture of the planet or the object you were watching. And that's what actually Chris Morissette explained yesterday. That's kind of a lac imaging, and that's the same process. I didn't know anything about that by then, but that kind of got me hooked. And I decided to join the Houston Astronomical Society to learn a little bit more. I remember I had a spotoscope, and I was using that. It's an 80-millimeter spotoscope, so I went to the dark side. I watched with it, and it was great. And I decided that I need something a little bit bigger. And I bought an 8-inch Dobsonian. So visual observing is great, especially in the dark side. And what happened? I decided to come back home, and after being in the dark side, I took out my scope to my backyard, and when I tried to see the same objects I was watching in the dark side, I saw nothing. And I tried to watch another objects, and I saw nothing again. So it got me really, really frustrated, and I said it's not possible that I can barely see 1/10 of what I can see in the dark side. And if you're lucky enough to kind of be able to go every weekend to the dark side, and you're lucky to have better weather, that's great. But if you're not having such a luck, like in my case, uh, I wanted to keep on observing, and I needed to find some way of doing that. So I began kind of researching what I would be able to do in order to keep on watching. So let me show you the next screen. This was the spotoscope I was telling you about. As you see, it's not a high-end equipment or scope. What I did buy, because it has I didn't have a good mount, was an Explore Scientific Nano mount. It's an equatorial mount, and I said, okay, now I can at least slew manually to whatever target I am going to observe. And I noticed that there was some kind of movement in the stars. So I would be looking at the stars, and a couple of seconds later, they would no longer be there. So I began doing a little bit of research, and I just bought a little electric motor so that it would keep on with the right ascension and kind of following the stars. And I also bought a little camera, and that's the camera you can see there. That's a 224 CW224. It's an entry-level camera. And that's the same camera that Chris Morissette was talking about in yesterday's conference that allowed him to do the great pictures that he was able to take. So the 224 is advertised as a planetary camera. But I can tell you, and you will see some of the images that I was able to get, that it's not only a planetary camera, but also the DSO camera. You can get pretty nice and pretty good globular clusters images and galaxies and nebulae. So it's a good camera to start with. And since I didn't know very much what I was doing, I decided to go step by step. So I bought this little camera, and I began learning about how to make it work with software. So I could record some kind of images and see what was going on. Let's see, let me show you the. So these were my first images. And as you can see, and now I was able to see from my backyard more stars than I was able to see with my 8-inch Newtonian. I was super happy that I was able to get stars. The problem was that I didn't know where on Earth or in the sky I was looking at, because the field of view with a 224, the sensor is kind of small, and you have it on a spotoscope, 80 millimeter spotoscope. It's really small. So I was trying to find some of the targets I wanted to look at, and it was impossible. So I said I have to do something about it, because I don't know. I can see stars, but I don't know what stars they are. Where am I? I would know that I was aiming at a certain constellation, but from there to aim at the specific target that I wanted to, it was a very long way. So I decided that I needed to upgrade in a certain way in order for me to be able to achieve those goals. So what did I buy? As I told you, I'm going step by step. I began doing some research, and I knew that I needed something to find and track targets. So after doing some research, I went to Cloudy Nights, and I bought an Altazimuth Ioptron Cube mount. It was, I remember it was an year and a half ago, more or less, that I bought it. And it was, I bought it for around $100. So as you see, I was going step by step. I wasn't jumping into high tech and very expensive scopes nor mounts. And it has a hand controller, and I mounted it. As you, I took the top part of the mount, and I mounted this one, the Ioptron cube, on top of the Explorer Scientific Nano mount. And I said, okay, now I will be able to find and track my targets. So once you align it, it's a very simple process, just pointing to certain stars, and then the computer on the handheld controller will just go to the target you want, and you will begin tracking. And what happened? I also realized that with the spotoscope, I wouldn't be going very far. So by that time, I decided to buy a little scope, an 50 millimeter Evo guide, and it's called it's an apochromatic guide scope astrograph. By that time, I remember kind of a year and a half ago, there was a very big backlog of scopes. And the only one that I found kind of available and I knew was a good quality one that would not only work for that moment, but for the future too, was this one. So I decided to upgrade my scope. And those are basic things that you need to have. If you don't have a good scope, or you don't have a mount that allows you to find and track the objects, and a camera, it's like you're missing some of the variables of the equation, and it will not end up the way you want. So some basic things are needed for you to get the results that you want. And these were my first decent results with that Ioptron cube. That's, I think it's like 12 years old. And but I was able to find my targets and also to kind of track them, even though it wasn't a perfect tracking. You can see that there's some displacement here, and on the other side too, I cropped it. So, but here you can see M13. And also, this is M8, the Lagoon Nebula. And I was pretty happy when I remember when the Lagoon Nebula began kind of appearing in my laptop screen, because I said I finally able to achieve something, because I was looking at the results from other people doing EAA, and they were all showing their images and how they say, and I couldn't get anything. But now I was able finally to see some nebulosity, and I remember I was super excited when I was able to see from my backyard these kind of images. And as you can see lots of stars in M13. And if you try to see anything with your scope and an eyepiece from my backyard, I live in a Bortle 8/9 sky area, and some of my neighbors like to turn their backyard lights on during the night, and there's a lot of light. But I was able to get these images, and I was really excited that I was finally able to see something. Now, what I would like you to see is and compare how it would look like, for example, in the dark side using a 50 millimeter scope. So this would be M13 with an eyepiece at the dark side, and using a 50 millimeter scope. So this little thing that you have there is what you would see visually. One thing I want to tell you is that visual observing is great. So it's not something that EAA and visual observing are not competing against each other. So they're complementary. If you can go to the dark side and do visual observing, it's a great experience. And if you can do EAA or AP at the dark side, it's even better. But doing visual observing has a great special magic that doing EAA hasn't got. There are two different things, and they complement each other. This would be what that same globular cluster would look like with an 80 millimeter scope at the dark side. And I want you to see what it would look like, actually what it looks like when I use my EAA setup from home. And here you have the image that I am able to get with this CWO. That's the entry-level camera that's advertised as a planetary camera, and an 80 millimeter scope for my backyard. And I have a lot of light pollution, but it allows me to keep on observing, watching, and even see many more details that with an eyepiece it would be impossible for you to see. And that's the kind of the magic, that's the technique that EAA uses and allows you to get all the details that an eyepiece will not allow you to provide. Of course, when you're beginning with astronomy, I guess you always want to improve, and so I decided that I needed to upgrade my mount, and I finally got I bought, after doing some research and analyzing. As you can see, I usually analyze a lot, and then I make my decisions and go for it. I upgraded my mount. I got an Explore Scientific Exos 2 GT, and it's not a top of the line mount. It's an $800, $900 mount, but it works pretty good. And finally, I got my kind of a last setup. That's my actual setup. I got my mount. I got an Astrotech 8080 ED, and I mounted on top of it the Evo Guide. And of course, I had to update my camera. And now I got a much better camera. It's a 533 MC Pro, so it's a cool camera, and it has a larger sensor, and it allows you to get better pictures, more detail. And finally, I am working with both together. So I put on top of my 80 millimeter one my Evo Guide, and I can I switch the camera. So if I want a wide field of view, I mount my 533 on the smaller scope that has a wider field of view, and I can take very nice pictures. Or if I want more pinpoint, I'll just leave it on the 80. I also have my laptop, and this is kind of my setup in my backyard. So I have my computer connected to the rig, and a little table. And as you can see, I have neighbors all around, and I don't know why they usually like to turn on the lights on, but I keep on going. And you don't need a lot of a very top of the end telescope nor big aperture telescopes to do EAA. It's a very portable, and you can move it from one place to another, right? And take it from one place to another, and it offers you the opportunity of watching a lot of the night sky that visually you wouldn't be able to see from a light polluted area like I am living at. Let me show you now one of the images I took. This is Messier 104 Sombrero Galaxy. It's 29.3 million light years from Earth, and that's how you can see it from if you're in your backyard doing EAA. So you're using an eyepiece. I guess you would need a very large aperture telescope to be able to view it like this. But using EAA, that you see what EAA actually does is it gets images and begins stacking the images. So it gets one image, then it stacks on top of the image, another image, and the idea is, and what really happens is that the signal increases at a larger rate than the noise. So everything increases, both the signal and the noise, but the signal increases at a large ratio, so you get more information, and that's what you can actually watch when you're looking at your screen. And I forgot to tell you, I'm not going to do a talk about technicalities of EAA. The idea is for everyone who doesn't know it to see how it works, what it offers, and if it might be useful for you. I'm not going to go very deep into technical aspects, and so it will be kind of a plain, simple talk so that everyone can understand what and see what EAA is and what it does. It can help you about. This was using my 224 camera, you see, M17, the Omega Nebula from my backyard too, and I was one of my first images too that I took with my first setup. And it's one of our galaxy's youngest star clusters at only 1 million years old. And here you can see I was happy I could see kind of the sun. And here you can see the sun. And as you can see, the tracking with the Ioptron cube wasn't that great, but it even that allows you to see much better and quite a lot more than with an eyepiece, especially living in a completely light polluted sky like I am doing. And I think most of the people who, unless you're living way out, has the same problems. And this EAA is a way to solve those kind of problems and keep you outside in your backyard until 3-4 o'clock in the morning when you're able to do it to observe. So it's good. And this is one of my latest, well, actually with the new camera and using filters that in this case, it's the L Extreme. It's a narrowband filter that only allows HA and O3 wavelengths to go through. That's the same target, but with filters, okay? So a lot of light pollution gets thrown away. And you can see how it improves. So improving your scope and your camera just a little bit will allow you to get really, really, really good camera, good images. And the good thing about it is that you can share it. You can share it with not only you, but family members or friends, because one of the things that EAA allows you to do is not only to watch, but programs, the software usually allows you to save those different images that the camera is taking, and you can save them just as you are seeing them in your screen, or later you can post-process them and even enhance more the pictures, the images you are looking at, and begin learning more about the different objects, learning more about their details, their colors. So it's a really good deal. It not only helps you observe, but then you can go deeper into the different targets. I will go a little bit faster so that Jeff has also time to do his stuff. This is the Lagoon Nebula with the 533. You can see the huge amount of stars that you can from the backyard. This is straight from the backyard. I wasn't in a dark place, in a dark side. So you can see how well the EAA allows you to see the different targets. This is the M24, the Sagittarius star cloud, and from here too. So this is with my just the 80 millimeter scope, so the 8080, and this is what it can provide you. And this is SharpCap. This is the software. This is one of the variables of the equation that you need to have, a software that will allow you to connect with the camera and capture all those images. I use SharpCap. There's a free version of SharpCap that allows you to do almost everything, and there's a paid one. It's the Pro that allows you to polar align, and there's a lot of stuff. You can do almost everything with this program. So as you can see, this is, as you're watching, for example, this is M42, the Orion Nebula. You can set up and the exposure time. This is a 2-second exposure time. And what it does is that using shorter exposure times and more exposures, you can get great images instead of using a long exposure time, for example, I don't know, 2-3 minutes, and you don't have a good mount, a perfect mount that will do a great tracking. So using short exposures allows you to do live stacking and to get these kind of images. You can also play with the histogram. You can darken or lighten the image, and you can play also with the saturation of colors, and it has an histogram, so it will show you to get the right exposure time and gain and offset and everything that you need. So this program is really good, and it's also free. So it's I really recommend it. This is another thing that the program allows you to do. You can play it solve, and it will do annotations on the target you are looking at. So this is the NCG 2158 and this is M35. It's an open cluster, and it will and you can keep these images too. So you can save them, and you can keep them for you to watch later, or to show them to whoever you want to show them. So if you want to see what EAA is about, there's a website that's nightskysnetwork.com, and it's for amateur and professional astronomers to share with everyone their night sky viewings with cameras attached to their telescope. That's EAA, and it's free. So you can go there, and there's usually a couple of guys that are doing EAA and broadcasting live, and you can have a live taste of what EAA allows you to do. Especially Fridays and weekends, they are there. So you can check these, and you don't need to register. You just accept the headphones, and you can hear what they're saying, and you can look at their images and how they're moving all the exposures and the gains and everything that needs to be done. And so you can watch it even though you don't have an ENA set up. You can see how someone else is doing it. Now, what usually happens is that you keep all those subs that you have been saving, if you want, when you're doing live stacking, and you can post-process them later. And that's kind of crossing a little bit to AP. So once you begin with EAA, you would like to get even better images. And this is this is M8, the Lepp Nebula. So after post-processing, I was able to get a lot of details from the clouds of dust, and I really like this image. And it takes time, and it's a completely different universe. But I'm sure once you begin doing EAA, you will get hooked too, and you would like to get the best images you can get from your information, because that's something you've already gotten. Doing EAA, if you want to save the subs, you already have them, and then you just post-process them, and you can get stuff like this. And also, I also got the NCG7, the North American Nebula, and once you begin with AP and post-processing, it turns almost into an art, because you can bring up the different aspects that you want to show, and different kind of wavelengths, and there's nothing for example, that says this should be this color or the other. Of course, if you come out with a color that doesn't really exist, it's kind of up to you. But you can use different techniques to bring out different kinds of information from your images. And this is what, from my backyard, North American Nebula looks like. Let's hurry up. So what do you need to do EAA? First, and I learned this by experience. I didn't know anyone to tell me, so I had to go step by step, and I finally kind of got it together. So, but it's better to learn from someone else's experience than to learn it by yourself. So you waste less time. So what I recommend you is that you need first a tracking mount. It can be either altasimod or equatorial. You need a relatively fast scope. The faster the scope, less time needed to gather photons. Okay, so if you have an F10, it will take a lot of time for you to gather photons. So the faster the scope, the better. You need a suitable camera in place of the eyepiece. That's kind of a very important thing. And finally, a device where to run the live stacking software and connect to the mount camera screen. That's your laptop, where you can run, for example, the software that you need, and it gets everything together. So those are 4 things that you need if you want to do EAA in a successful way. Now, this is a website that I recommend if you want to read a little bit further and learn more about EAA and the different kinds of equipment you will need and how to focus on the software. It's called californiaskies.com/blog/category EAA for beginners. It's a very helpful one. You will get a lot of information and it will help you go one way or the other. And we also have an EAA special interest group, and we have Zoom meetings every month. It's the 3rd Wednesday of each month. And in those meetings, we can go deeper, and we usually go deeper, and we share our experiences and our things about our equipment, how to improve it, and we can go into more technical aspects of the EAA. So if you are interested, everyone is welcome to join that group. You don't have to be a professional nor a seasoned EAA. Everyone is welcome. And beginners, of course, are welcome. You can just join and listen or ask any question you want. The idea for the group also is to share what we know and learn from each other. So if you want to learn a little bit more and ask specific questions about EAA, everyone's welcome to join that special interest group. And now I guess I will leave Jeff so he can keep on explaining how he uses the electronic assisted astronomy to do some outreach. And you will have a very nice presentation about that. So Jeff, let's see if you can.
Thank you, Carlos. Let me see. Yeah. If you can stop sharing, then I should be able to, there we go.
There you go.
And guys, while you're getting that up, Jeff, if I could just comment on a couple of things. If you're interested in the link for the EAA SIG group, send me an email, info@astronomyhouston.org. I will send that your way and make sure that you've got that link to join. And then the second thing I just wanted to kind of clarify, for those who may not be aware, when we're talking about a fast telescope, we're talking about the focal ratio of the telescope. So you might see something that says this telescope is an f5, an f10, f4.7, something like that. The lower that number, the faster the telescope typically. It's a shorter focal ratio. And to Carlos's point, you'll capture those photons a little faster.
Okay. All right, EAA and outreach. I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about my love for both imaging and outreach and how I combined that into kind of one thing, which was kind of cool. Didn't start out that way. In fact, my story is very similar to Carlos's, where I started out in my backyard with a Dob and got very frustrated on what I couldn't see. It took actually quite a while before I actually went to a dark site and realized what I couldn't see. But back in 2011, they didn't have all these nice EAA cameras. And so I kind of started with DSLR. And my story then branched to astrophotography. So I had gotten into astrophotography. Joined Fort Bend Astronomy Club in 2013, and if anybody knows anything about Fort Bend Astronomy Club, they're very heavy in outreach. So I got involved in outreach, but that was completely visual at the time. However, the pandemic of COVID-19 kind of changed that. So just kind of wanted to review that situation here. So back in March of 2021, the George reopened after having been closed for about 2 years, first for remodeling and then COVID-19 hit. And they decided when they reopened that for social distancing, they wanted to use cameras instead of viewing through the eyepieces because people have to be close quarter, touch the eyepieces, all this kind of stuff's not safe for pandemics. So had to wear masks and all that stuff. So what they decided to do is go with EAA. So it was quite a big effort to get all that going at the George. And we were doing that on all 3 of the scopes. So I'll give you kind of a review of the George here in a minute. Next slide. But since then, as things have relaxed, the big dome has gone back to visual, but the 2 smaller domes, the East and West Dome, are still doing EAA. And also, Fort Bend Astronomy Club has restarted its outreach program known as Astronomy on Wheels, where we go to visit schools and other places, bring our own scopes and set them up. And we're also encouraging people to do EAA as well at the Fort Bend Astronomy Club outreach program. So quick tour of the George. I know there was a field trip that Renee planned and organized out in June to come out, and I was there that night. So if you came out, I was operating the East Dome, which is the dome over here, which is where our 18-inch Newtonian's at. The big scopes in here, that's a big 36-inch RC scope, and the West Dome has a 14-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain. The deck out here, this was actually taken during an A Day by Chuck Hale, previous A Day. And speaking of that, Joe had mentioned that's coming up near the end of the month. But these are where all the deck scopes are set up. And those deck scopes are either the museum scopes or actual people's volunteers' own scopes that they bring out. And some people are actually doing EAA as well. So we have both visual and EAA going on now at the George. So looking at the FBAC 18-inch, it's owned and operated by the Fort Bend Astronomy Club. Now, we don't own the dome because we can't own any property out there, but we have an agreement with the museum to be able to house our equipment, our scope and computers and all that stuff in the dome, as long as we provide volunteers for their outreach program, which is Saturday nights, and sometimes they have Friday get-togethers and things like that. Sometimes they have Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts rent the place for like a Friday night or Wednesday night or something like that. And then also special events like meteor showers and things like that are open. It's an 18-inch Newtonian on an equatorial fork mount. So it's a pretty big beast over here. And it was actually purchased from Lloyd, the late Lloyd Overcash, which many of y'all know. And I had a chance to meet Lloyd before he passed away. And he's a real nice gentleman. And it was quite a big loss. But that was back in 1993 and went operational in 94. So this scope's been in there for quite a while. Now, it's also credited for over 300 asteroid discoveries. And HAS's Joe Dellinger, he's also an FBAC member, was involved in many of those discoveries. And Joe has, and he's given, I think, many talks on that in the past. Very, very, very interesting. And in those days, they used a very expensive scientific CCD camera to do that research. That was a monochrome camera that had a bad spot in it because those cameras were so expensive that they were a lot cheaper if you bought one with a defective chip, but a chip with a bad spot in it. So, very, very sensitive camera, but not really good for EAA. And then the public viewing nights on Saturday nights, like I mentioned. So, I wanted to talk a little bit, and Carlos hit on this a little bit as well. But in my experience, I started out with visual. And so I have a little bit of an experience on the differences between EAA and visual. And, just wanted to mention that, one is not better than the other. EAA is a complement to visual, in my belief. And when we do the Saturday nights out there, there are both people with visual doing visual and other people doing EAA. And I think it complements it really well. And what's really neat is like when they got the Ring Nebula in the big scope, and then people come over and look at the Ring Nebula, with our EAA representation of it, so they can get an idea of the differences between visual and EAA. That's a very awesome experience, I think. But just kind of I'm just going to go through the benefits of each. And when I say dim objects, I really mean dim objects in light polluted skies. Okay, obviously you go at the dark side, you can see dim objects in good sized dobs. But really where EAA excels is to bring out those dim objects in light polluted skies with the cameras. Also color, and that's one of the things I always talk about at the George. My analogy is you look out into a dark street at night that's poorly lit street that has cars parked out there. What color are the cars? The old Moody Blues song, red is gray, yellow, white. There's some truth to that. And so visually, you can't really see the colors except some very bright objects, but the camera can bring out color in galaxies and nebulae and that kind of thing. So the colors are nice to show. Multiple people can view at the same time. Back in the day when we did visual, it was the Wild West, and they let as many people show up as wanted to show up. We would have 300 people going through there a night, and and each person maybe had 30 seconds to look through the scope. So, that was kind of, somebody waited in line for an hour to look 30 seconds. So that was kind of tough. But with EAA, we can, let multiple people see at the same time. And to that extent, it was also less exhausting for the operator, because trying to get 300 people through that dome, you're just brain dead at the end of the night. And EAA has just been a lot more, you feel a lot more alert at the end of the night when you shut it down and leave. And safer, when I say safer for the public, not just to the extent of the pandemic and things like that, but in the East Dome, it's a big Newtonian. You have a ladder you got to climb up on, and it always worried me when we had elderly folks or small kids get up on that ladder. We had to get a step stool for the kids, or the parents had to hold them, and so in general, that EA has eliminated that concern, that safety concern that we had when we were doing visual in the East Dome. And again, that's pretty specific to the East Dome. Visually, obviously, the biggest benefit of visual is that experience of having the photons in your eyes actually hit your eyes. When the mood hits your eye, that's amore, right? You cannot get that experience with EAA. So that is like the number one big thing that visually is really, really much better than EAA. And planets, and I think Carlos talked about this earlier as well when Carlos, Joe, and I were talking before the meeting started, in the sense that you can't really live stack planets. So it's just a video feed in EAA, and it kind of jumps around. The scene makes it jumps around and stuff like that. Now, if the stuff that Sonny Manley does that you've seen in the last night's presentation, that's astrophotography, where you take the video data and you process it, and you get an outstanding view of Jupiter. But when you just do a live video feed of Jupiter, it's this little blobby object that bounces around, and visually the planets look much better. Now the moon looks pretty good with visual feed with EAA because it's bright, but the planets, because of seeing and that kind of stuff, planets are much better visually. Stars, the stars actually look much better visually. And that's because usually when you're doing EAA, you're exposing longer to bring out the faint details, and the stars tend to get blown out, what we call saturated, become white. You lose the colors in the stars that maybe start bloating a little bit. And so visually stars look much better. And then the rest of the ones are kind of no-brainers. The tracking, you have to be precise. Carlos explained, the tracking with EAA is very important. And then, of course, it's simpler. You don't have all that equipment that you need with EAA. So that's just my experience, benefits, the pros of each. Now I'll just kind of walk through the East Dome setup that we have. And the camera that we use is a ZWO 294MC. Which is kind of an EAA purposed camera. You can also, I have one myself, and I use it for astrophotography as well as EAA. It's a color camera. It's extremely sensitive camera. It has what's called a high quantum efficiency. It's a backlit chip. Our field of view, it's a 4/3 inch size chip, and our field of view is approximately 1/2 degree by 1/3 degree. So it's not great, but it's not tiny either. And this particular camera was donated by Joel and Becky Brewer, who a lot of y'all know. They've got an observatory at the dark side, and they're always quite helpful. Focusing was a big issue. We had a ratty old Botanoff mask that was built a long time ago, and we needed a new one. So we got in touch with Roland Fields at HTC. We used to hold our meetings there before COVID-19 hit. So Roland's was kind of our contact person there. And he's got all these nice little gadgets and things. And he was able to laser cut a Botanoff mask. And so the Botanoff mask is shown here. It just has this pattern. And when you put it on, it creates this spiky pattern around a star. And this shows an in-focus star. If it wasn't in focus, this let me get my little laser here. This spike right here would be offset either above or below where it is now. So you just crank on the focuser. You want to set pretty short exposures, high gain, and crank on the focuser until you get it to look pretty much in focus. And you can also see that these rays that extend out here also help you determine whether it's in focus or not. So that was really key. And the other thing that's important, and a lot of people, and I learned this the hard way too, is that focus changes with temperature. And this is usually not a problem in the summer, but in the wintertime, temperature drops quickly, and you generally have to refocus your telescope. So that's something important to remember if you're doing your own imaging or EAA, that you do need to refocus probably several times during an imaging session. Auto guiding. Okay, the mount's 28 years old. It has tracking problems, and we did a lot of work to actually get it to track well enough to even do EAA, but it still wasn't good enough to do it unguided, even with short exposures. So we ended up, we had an older guide scope we replaced, had problems, so we ended up getting a teleview, probably overkill for a guide scope, but we also intend to use this for astrophotography as well, for wide field viewing, so it's going to have more purpose than just a guide scope. And then we also, and this is actually my camera here, I've kind of lent to the club because I had to go back to use my old guide camera for another reason I don't want to get into, but this is the QHY-53-178M, which is the same camera that David Haviland uses for his moon photography. I know he's given presentations on that. So we're using that for the guiding, PhD2 for the software. And again, the guiding is required because of the tracking issue that the mount has. It just tends to wander, and we just need to keep it, keep it pointed where it needs to be. We also have a 40-inch TV that we set up outside, so we generally keep the public outside, but now we're letting people in to give dome tours. We let small groups in and they can't look at the scope, but to show our EAA setup and how we do things and so forth. So it's quite interesting. Software, we've always had the SkyX even for visual to control the scope, pointing of the scope go to, and that kind of stuff. So we're still using that. SharpCap, same software that Carlos is using for live stacking and video streaming of the moon. PhD2 I mentioned earlier for the auto guiding, and then we've just recently added plate solving, and there's ASTAP or ASTAP, I don't know how it's pronounced, hooks into SharpCap and allows us to do plate solving. So now we're starting to do plate solving as well. So we're starting to finally get into the 21st century. And then we're running on basically a really simple PC. It's an HP desktop i5 processor, 12 gig, very, very basic PC. You don't need a very powerful computer to do EAA. So now we'll get into some of the pictures that we've taken. And this was one from early on before we actually got the framing quite down, but we still got a pretty good image of this M81. This is 10-second exposures. Again, the 18-inch Newtonian's light bucket, so you don't need to expose long. In fact, what we found is the longer we expose, the more washed out the image gets. So we don't want to expose, for too long. So this was taken back, I think, when we first reopened. This was in April. So as you can see, you can actually see some of the outer arms of the galaxy here, which you cannot see visually. Visually, we can basically just see the bright part of the core, and we can also make out some of the dust lanes in the galaxy, some color. Again, I post-processed this a little bit, so I enhanced it a bit. It definitely shows things that we can see that, visually at the George. Now you could go out to West Texas and see this through a Dob. You wouldn't see the color, but you could see the detail, but not at the George. So that's the benefit of that. This was taken in January of this year, Crab Nebula, M1. Again, this is something you can see visually, but you'll see just kind of a blob. You won't really see much of the tendrils, the details of it, but definitely not the color. We went to 20-second exposures here, took 82 of them for this particular image. So this is always a favorite because, talking about one of the things interesting is how quickly this thing actually expands. If you take an image of this every year and play it back like a GIF, you can actually see it expand. And there are videos out there, or GIFs out there on the internet that show that. So it's a very interesting object. This is a really cool one, the Running Man, or what I call Gumby. So this is, normally one that gets overlooked because you got, the Orion Nebula right next door to it. But this is a reflection nebula, and these are very difficult. Reflection nebulas are very difficult to pick up out at the George. And so again, this shows you the power of EAA. We were able to pick this up on a night when the moon's up, moonlit night. This one's extremely difficult to get. But with 20-second exposures, we were able to get it to come out, and we couldn't actually even see it in an individual sub-exposure. So we had to kind of do it, but before we had plate solving off of the star patterns and just frame it that way. And then after we stacked it, we could actually start to see it. So that kind of shows you the power of EAA there. This is a nice one here. This is the Whale Galaxy. This is one that we did recently in July. This one was only 10-second exposures, and you can see the detail and the colors came out really nice. And we also have the calf up here is this little companion galaxy, the whale and the calf, and its calf, 24 million light years away. Again, visually, this would be a difficult object. Definitely wouldn't be able to see any of that detail. The dust lanes and so forth wouldn't show up. But galaxies is one of the more favorite things that we like to show in the East Dome, because my own personal tale, when I first went out to the George before I was even a member of FPAC, I had my job and I wanted to see a galaxy, and I was disappointed that I didn't see one when I went out there. Nobody showed me one. They showed me a globular, and when I got home, I realized that wow, that globular looked really good through that big 36-inch scope. I blew my little knob away. I didn't appreciate it at the time because I wanted to see a galaxy, and so that's why I'm kind of biased towards showing galaxies at the George. So galaxy season, which a lot of times can be a problem for other people, and it's a nice season at the George with EAA. In the past, galaxy season was not so good visually at the George. So. And then finally, everybody's favorite from Star Trek and on the bridges, the Enterprise, the Trifid Nebula is always a fan favorite. So this is 10-second exposures, 116 10-second exposures, and again, they show up pretty good in here, and always loved nebulae are actually my favorite objects for astrophotography, just because I have a scope that's kind of built for that. But nebulas are also some of my favorite objects to show. So I just want a special thanks to the East Dome team. Chris Morissette, he's everywhere. So I kind of recruited him, and he went in with guns a-blazing and got into it. And the great guy, Liz, of course, I think everybody knows she's a HS number 2, and she's a great person, and she's kind of has her own astrophotography stuff going on, and has volunteered to help out. Lee Higgins is a visual guy that is extremely brilliant, and he picked up on the EA stuff very, very, very fast. So he's really amazing, really amazing guy. Wayne Wiegand is vice president of FPAC, and he's also a visual guy. So he went out of his comfort zone to learn this EA stuff, because we needed him. When we started out, it was just Wayne, Paul, and myself doing it, and that was it. And recently we've been able to get more people involved. And Paul Knoll, without him, nothing would be possible, because we had some serious issues with the RA clutch, and Paul's an aircraft mechanic, and he was able to get that clutch out, take it to the machine shop and fix it. And like I said, without him, we wouldn't be able to do anything. And then Todd Donovan is actually our newest operator, just certified him, and he joined FPAC in February as a new member, and picked up a scope from a former member and wanted to learn astrophotography, and got him interested in the EAA stuff. And like I said, we got a good team. We're hoping to expand and get more people. But I definitely appreciate everybody that stepped up to help out. And now I want to kind of switch to my own personal EAA with my own setup. And this is the antithesis of an EAA setup, because this is an astrophotography setup. And but at the time, that's basically all I had. So I figured, okay, I'll set up my astrophotography rig at the George. Let's see what we can do. Just real quick, it's a Takahashi FSQ 106 astrophysics mount, which is an extremely good tracking mount. Moonlight Nightcrawler focuser, ZWO ASI 2600, which is an APCS. It's like a crop size DSLR sensor, monochrome. It's monochrome, not a color camera. So I have a filter wheel with that, where I have filters in it. And I do have both color filters, and I have the narrowband filter. So Carlos mentioned he's got a narrowband filter that's kind of like a multipass filter that passes both hydrogen alpha and oxygen. In my case, my filters only pass one bandwidth, so I can only take one bandwidth at a time. And then Starlight Express OAG stands for off-axis guider, so I don't have a separate guide scope. Basically, it has a pick-off prism that redirects the light out. And I have another camera that's a little QHY camera here. And the reason why I had to go back to my old guide camera was because I couldn't reach focus with my new guide camera once I bought my new ZWO camera. So it's just one of those things you run into when you do this kind of stuff. Things don't work out sometimes as you plan. So Real quick, I'll go over some images that I did out there. These are EAA images, not astrophotography images. And so I did a little bit different. I did it Ansel Adams style. My monochrome camera. This is hydrogen alpha filter, 5-minute exposures. I did do guiding on it, and 15 5-minute exposures, the Horsehead Nebula, and you just can't see this kind of detail in a broadband. When I say broadband, a color image. So I was able to treat the public to this. It took a little bit for them to get used to black and white. They're like, why is this not color? And it's like, okay, let me explain to you. But definitely, this is eye candy for your rods, not your cones of your eyes. So, but that's the Horsehead, and I don't know if this one's ever been done at the George, but this is the Flaming Star Nebula without the flame. The flame is actually Flaming Star is actually a reflection nebula, so this is hydrogen alpha and didn't show up in that, but it does show up the fine details of the nebula and actually also the very faint areas of the nebula, which you just cannot see out there visually. So this is one of the benefits of using narrowband filters. And then everybody's favorite, I took this in March, the Rosette Nebula. And so this is kind of done towards the end. I only got 8 exposures, but you can see it's a very strong object. So it shows up extremely well, even with a short number of exposures. And then what I did was I went out to the HAS dark site and I collected some O3 or oxygen data and some color star data, and I came up with this picture. And so this is astrophotography. This is not EAA. So this is where, I took all the data, I post-processed it. And this is what's known as an HOO image, which is a color palette, which means you put the hydrogen in the red and the oxygen in the green and the blue channels to create this color, false color image. I like the HOO color palette because it more resembles real color. And then the stars, I took the narrowband stars out and replaced them with actual color stars. So, and then finally, my last slide, I want to talk a little bit about doing EAA at outreach events. Where in this case, FBAC just started up its Astronomy on Wheels after a long outage after COVID-19, and we were encouraged to do EAA. And I said, well, I don't really have an EAA rig that's very portable. My setup is for astrophotography. I don't want to take an hour to set up and an hour to tear it down. That's too much work. What can I do? Well, I had this little mount, Nexstar 4 mount, that I used for a grab and go and a little refractor. And actually, that refractor was my very first astrophotography scope that I had retired. And I brought it out of imaging retirement. I used it for visual, for outreach. And I had this wedge, this built-in wedge on this mount that I never used. And I said, what the heck? I'll just give it a shot. I had the 294 camera ready that I used on my other setup. The field flattener I hadn't used for years. I had that stored away and had to take it out of, dig in the corner of the closet or dig it out and set it in my backyard. And first I set up the wedge backwards because I didn't know what I was doing. And then I figured that out and got it working, got it tested out in my backyard. And then I took it out to the event, which was at the Robert Shaw Steam Center in Katy. I've done that event before visually, and I know that the light pollution there is absolutely horrendous. And so I figured, well, let me try it. And during the daylight, I had it in the sun, and I had it. I basically just did a rough polar alignment with my cell phone, with my compass, my cell phone, and it was tracking the sun really well. It pretty much 100% zoom. It stayed on it, moved very little. That's impressive, And then when I got dark, I had gone to M17, which is also one of the images that Carlos showed you on his setup, and with just 2-second exposures. And this is actually the star color here actually blew me away, because I said earlier that the star color in EAA is generally not that good, but with very short exposures, the stars actually came out really, really nice. So I was really impressed about that. And then again, the nebula, it's still kind of faint, but it is showing some of the outer regions of it. It's something that the kids there could not have seen unless I was doing EAA. This light pollution is so bad it wouldn't be visible in any of the visual scopes, even the 12-inch Dob that Jay Ford brought. But during the daylight hours before it got dark, people came out, looked at it, asked questions. Some people were very interested in the technology, and that's also good aspect about EAA with this is people get interested in the technology. Oh, you can stick a camera. Oh, a lot of people are interested in that. And so that's also good to talk about. And like I said, I was impressed with the setup. I'll probably use it again. It's unfortunately, I don't think they make this mount anymore with the wedge. I think you still get the mount, but I'm not sure if the wedge is still available, and you can't seem to get the mount by itself. I don't like the kits or the combinations that Celestron has, because those scopes aren't really too high focal length. So I ended up buying this mount separately and bought the Astrotech 72ED refractor separately, and the scope is a little heavy for it, but it still works. It still works okay for this mount. But there's other combinations. I was helping an FBAC member who was wanting to get into it with some recommendations and things, and with some different recommendations for scopes and mounts in order to do this. But you don't want a high focal length scope. You want to stay away from that, because as Carlos showed you, you can, with the camera, you can actually bring out quite a bit of detail even with the low focal length telescope. This focal length of the Astrotech refractor is 430 millimeter focal length. And that's basically my presentation. I hope you all enjoyed it. Are there any questions?
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff and Carlos. For anybody who has any questions for either of our two speakers tonight, please come off of mute and feel free to ask those. We had quite a good conversation going in the meeting chat, but I didn't see any direct questions necessarily.
Hey, Joe, this is Bill Spazzeri. A couple of things, not so much. First of all, Jeff, I'll never forget your phrase, eye candy for your rods. That's going to be in my head all the time. I love it. It's so descriptive. Anyway, also, I can tell everybody that if you think that maybe, Jeff, he kept saying how maybe not first class his setup was at the Shaw Center that you see in that picture there. But I was there. I was extremely impressed. I saw that Omega Nebula that he's got on the left over there. And maybe he thinks it's not his best deal. It worked fantastic for outreach. I think it was absolutely terrific. And I have to say, I know Jeff has been talking, and many others have been talking about EAA for years now. And, and I've been listening to presentations. I know what it is, and I see the results. But when I saw what Carlos did, especially Carlos, in such what I would say a relatively short period of time, the deep sky images he can get from his light polluted areas is, I might be the last one to figure this out, but I think it's revolutionary in terms of amateur astronomy, similar to what we got from digital cameras. When you can get a deep sky object from a light polluted area and he did it, he figured out how to do it in a short period of time. Very impressive, amazing. And I think a lot of amateur astronomers could just start to see. I know we all want to see stuff at the eyepiece. Don't get me started. Okay. I get it. But anyway, I was very impressed with what they did. And I think that a lot of amateurs could just do amazing stuff with that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to take anything away from visual observing. I enjoy visual observing. I went out to the dark side one time with Lee Higgins, set up my astrophotography rig, and he had his dial out there, and we had a great time, observing various targets while my astrophotography rig was clicking away and collecting data. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Appreciate the comment, Bill. I tend to agree with you, especially as connected as we are nowadays. It's a fantastic tool, to Jeff's point, in doing outreach and making sure that we can, continue to.
Would we be doing this if it was?
Go ahead.
Doing COVID? I don't know. Maybe not. So I know some was happening before, but I think COVID, kind of accelerated it a little bit. Kind of a silver lining of the cloud, kind of.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Who else has any questions for our guest speakers tonight? All right, going once, going twice. Fantastic. All right. Jeff and Carlos, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Like I said, I know I learned a lot. We were talking beforehand about some of the things that I was trying with the EAA. I'm super excited about it. Given where we're going with light pollution, to Debbie's point in the chat earlier, this may be the only option that we have in the future to do any kind of astronomy. I'm hoping it doesn't come to that, but it's certainly a wonderful option to have in the back pocket should that continue to diminish over time. So, and Debbie, I see you came off of mute. I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, just slight details on the light pollution. First of all, I expect to have a New York Times letter in the next 2 or 3 days. I heard from the editor a few days ago, but I'm working on. I've decided that in big cities, this is not going to work until we get the police on our side. So we've been collecting sites of auto pedestrian accidents. I almost had one myself. The street dropped out for like 50 feet. That's exactly where a pedestrian was crossing to a bus stop. So this seems to be getting their attention. And that's also the point I make in the New York Times. And I'm hoping that the light pollution community will understand that it doesn't work to have environmentalists say light one way and have the police say light a different way. So that's where I'm trying to push things, is if you see anything that's police, don't go check out the site. Steve Goldberg and I are surprised how often there's a glary light that's behind a bus stop where you have pedestrians and high glare light combining. This seems to get their attention.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the update, Debbie. Basically, you're saying don't give that crown over to EAA just yet. So there's hope for visual.
Don't give up. Don't give up.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, hopefully you all can see my screen again here. I just wanted to share this particular slide one more time. These are the upcoming events that we have next Wednesday. We have the VSIG meeting the following Tuesday, October 18th. We have our social. The day after that, we have the EAA SIG meeting that Carlos helps lead. And then, like I said, at the end of the month, we have the El Dorado Star Party as well as Astronomy Day at the George Observatory. If you want any information about these events, send me an email, info@astronomyhouston.org, and I'll share more of those details. The one thing I will say is the SIG meetings are for HAS members only. We don't want to, quite open it up yet, just because there may be some discussions around the dark site and specific items there that may give people access to it that don't necessarily need access. So, but if you do have any questions, please send me an email to that address. And our next meetings are going to be Thursday, November 3rd. So as Debbie had mentioned, we've got our novice meeting that day. And the following day on Friday, November 4th, we have our general meeting as well as our elections for the 2023 officers. As always, I kind of wrap this up with the social media shout outs. If you're on any of these social media platforms, please give us a follow. And if you have any questions, like I said multiple times tonight, send us an email, info@astronomyhouston.org. With that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank Carlos and Jeff again for a wonderful presentation, and we will see you all soon. Take care, everyone. Have a great night.